You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
What if you already swallowed the blue pill and never even realized it? Think about it. Were your beliefs chosen, or were they uploaded into your brain by your culture, your school, your parents? What if the version of you walking around isn't actually you? Today we are unraveling reality with the brilliant Rebecca Goldstein, philosopher, writer, and a mind that dares to question everything. Does meaning exist, or do we just pretend it to be? Can science explain everything, or is there something deeper? What is a good life? Truly. Stay tuned. You're watching Seekers Mindtalks, the science and spiritual podcast. What is it about philosophy and some humans? Is it human curiosity that drives us?
I really think that we are intrinsically a philosophical species. I think that this is really one of the things that distinguishes us from other species. It's not to put us above other species. All species have their dignity, but we are philosophical. We come into this world and we want to know where we are. What's the nature of this reality? Are we made of the same stuff or somehow different? Um, and we want to know uh, what we're supposed to do with ourselves in this time, so that we won't waste. I mean, existence is a fantastic thing. Existence is stupendous. Most things don't get to exist. We
Something is better than nothing?
Very much so. Very much so. I had a philosophy professor when I was an undergraduate in college. He's quite famous, although he published next to nothing. His name was Sidney Morgenbesser. This was at Columbia University in New York. And he had, there's an ontological argument for God's existence that goes back all the way to Saint Anselm, the Christian saint. And it was, God is the sum of all perfections, and existence is a perfection. So, of course, God must exist if he's to have. And so, Sidney Morgenbesser, who was a very pessimistic man, he had an ontological argument for God's non existence. And he was, existence is such a misery. Why would God go and do it? So he was a very funny man. He made very funny philosophical jokes. But I very much disagree with him. I think that existence. I mean, it's an amazing thing, and I think that we want to live in such a way to do justice to this thing that we have existence, and we want to live in such a way as to make it matter, um, to make it count. And I think all humans want this, and we find very creative ways of doing it, and unfortunately, we find very destructive ways of doing it too. Trying to gain power over others, and domination, all of this sort of thing. But it is a deep sense of not wanting to waste this life we have. So we are by nature, we're philosophical. We are just philosophical creatures, I think.
We are not far from our monkey cousins, and we certainly have a lot of characteristics of that. And what separates us is our ability to think and ponder into these
Ponder,
big questions.
self-reflection, that we can step outside of ourselves. We have these amazingly complicated brains, and they come equipped with not just consciousness, and I think we will probably want to discuss that, but self-consciousness, that we can sort of step outside of ourselves and look at ourselves and ask, what's it all about? What am I supposed to be doing with this short time I have here?
I mean, so are like consciousness and self consciousness two different things?
Yes, yes, they are. And, certainly our closest primate relatives. I've spent a lot of time with chimpanzees, And I see a lot of us in chimpanzees, many, many characteristics that are the same. We share tremendous amount of DNA with them. We are closer to chimpanzees than chimpanzees are to gorillas in terms of shared DNA.
True.
But and they're conscious. They're certainly conscious. They respond to the environment. They have feelings. They have intentions. Um, they have characteristics of certainly of consciousness. They teach one another things. Um, but they don't have this self-consciousness where they have or probably not, where they can sort of, or self-reflection, almost a kind of self-transcendence where you can sort of step outside of yourself and look at yourself as if you're just another thing to observe and interrogate and probe and investigate and ask, what am I supposed to be doing? And that I don't think any chimpanzee does. But this, and so yes, a big distinction between consciousness and self-consciousness or self-reflection or self-transcendence, whatever you want to call this very high capacity of mental ability that is afforded in our complicated brains.
And that gives us the ability of understanding knowledge. And
Exactly.
say, yes. And they also say like knowledge is a curse. In that sense, like where do we draw the line? Where do I stop to think? If I go on thinking, it can take us to a lot of places, both nice and not so nice.
I think so. I think I'm a big fan of knowledge. I think, knowledge should be pursued. We're always making claims as to what is true. And, knowledge is basically to be able to justify these claims as to what's true. And knowledge is really hard. We're lazy and we stop short of knowledge. We think we have it and we can be very assertive in our claims of knowledge. And I think that gets us into a lot of trouble. But this is one of the wonderful things that I think that both science and my orientation is very, I came into philosophy from science, from math and physics. So my orientation is very much toward the sciences. Um, but I think one of the things that the sciences and philosophy teach us is knowledge is very difficult. To be able to truly justify your belief is very difficult in such a way so that you could persuade somebody, not bully them, but persuade them, and open yourself up to their questions, to their doubts. This is what the art of philosophy, I think, is all about. And I think it's very salubrious. It's very healthy. I think we need more of it. Yes.
But where do I stop thinking? Like even if we go and look at a grander scale on how big the universe is, because just because we have this ability and other animals not, we
No.
can sort of search in this realm, and it goes to the infinite, and it can take you in a lot of bad places of nihilistic thoughts where you end up where you think like, okay, nothing makes sense. So you see a rare type of event in which a, a comparatively more intelligent organism end up in a more bad place because of its intelligence.
Well, yes, that can be true. And I would say a little bit of knowledge is a very dangerous place. And I am not a nihilist. I actually think if you push and you keep pushing, you get past nihilism, past that. And yes, I don't think we're only thinking creatures. We're also hopefully loving creatures, right? I mean, that this is also, in compassion and love and generosity. These are, I don't think we think our way towards those. We can cultivate them in ourselves. But, and which also involves our pushing past our animal nature, greed and give me, give me, give me. It's me and nobody but me that matters. But you know, I think well maybe you want to talk about nihilism, and what it actually means and how I think we can get past it.
I mean, if you start thinking on a grander scale, or like how big the universe is, or if the universe goes to a heat death, or supposedly if you think about the dinosaurs who lived about like a lot more than we did, and they ended up to near fossils. And if we are to foreseeably go through, even if we become like interplanetary, like Musk is planning now to go to Mars, and then the sun dies after a while, or even if the Milky Way collapses,
Yes.
then what's the point of it all?
Good. So the supreme law of physics, is the second law of thermodynamics, the law of entropy. The universe tends towards maximal entropy, heat death. It's That's where it's going to end up. And this is true. And you can't deny this. This is physics. This is science. This is the supreme law of physics. But um on that way, here we are. Here we are. And to me, knowing that all of us, what is life and flourishing is pushing against the law of entropy. All the laws of biology are resistance to the law of entropy. We can ally ourselves with the resistance that's life, that's flourishing, that's knowledge, that's beauty and not ugliness, that's compassion and not cruelty, that everything that's worth doing in this life, which is not going to last forever. It's very finite. I know this very much because I've lived a long time now, and I've lost many people, many people, friends and relatives. Um, and but this short time that we're here, we can ally ourselves with the resistance that's life and that's flourishing. Everything worth fighting for is worth. We have to win against entropy, and it's worth fighting for it. Our lives matter to us. The lives of other people certainly are the ones we love matter to us. So how do we make it better? While we're here, do we have to live forever? I don't. I'm going to tell you something. The thought of living forever isn't even appealing to me. I um I wouldn't want to.
Well, the ability to switch off at will and then maybe come back might be nice, rather than just to die.
Very soon, that I would like to come back maybe as something else. I already know what it's like to live this life. Um, so we actually, I also write. I'm a philosopher who also writes novels. And to me, that's part of the fun of it. I never write novels about myself or the people I know. I get to try to imagine my way into alternative lives by writing novels, and to me, that's good. That's great fun. I already know what it's like to be me. Yeah. So
It's interesting that you said you want to come as another life, because I was thinking like, if you go into this whole idea of reincarnation and you come back, what we are missing is memory. And if I had memory of like different multiple lifetimes,
yeah,
just to ponder into that area, not saying that's true, but if we have that memory of multiple lifetimes, multiple perspectives, wouldn't that give this form of conscious existence more peace, at least?
yeah, it probably would if that were a possibility. That would be. But as it is, to me, I think that is partly what art is. That's what we're trying to do in art and in literature, in all sorts of art, is try to imagine our way. The imagination is also a source, I think, of great peace and perspective. That's one of the things we really want to get, is perspective on ourselves. And to do that, it is we can do it in this life, I think, through trying to cultivate our imagination, and the arts do that, I think, and speaking to as many people from different traditions, from dialoguing across traditions is the most expansive thing I know, really, besides just thinking philosophically. That's also very expansive, but we have many means, I think, of enriching of enriching this life and enriching this life for other people and maybe for other creatures, which would be good. We have caused a tremendous amount of suffering on this planet. We don't share our planet very well with the other species. And that is so. And also,
Well, the Buddhist ideology speaks that like life is inherently suffering, and in some sense, the ultimate peace is like like even after a very busy day, or even if it's a good day or a bad day, any day, I would love to go to sleep. It's nothing.
yes.
It's a wonderful state to not just exist.
Oh, yeah.
And when I wake up, it can, even if it's a good day, it can be thought of as disturbance from that perfect solace or whatever.
Interesting. I think, it's very much a matter of temperament. Uh, and that's one of the such interesting things about our species. We are so different, and temperamentally different. And it's not just a matter of our tradition and our culture. I have or I had 3 siblings, totally different from me, and just completely different. We were raised in the same environment. We're just temperamentally so different. We want different things from life. So to me, I hate to sleep. I fight it. I fought it all my life. Um, yeah, I like being awake. And it seems to me I can never have enough hours in the day, and I can never have enough years of my life. It there's just so much to understand. To me,
Yeah, just to say, I was playing devil's advocate.
yeah,
I love to be awake.
you do. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Because I, I I do have this kind of cruises. No, this is just a deep feeling. It's a temperamental axiom of my life that existence is fantastic. I don't want to waste it.
Yeah, even I feel like really to the core, like something is actually better than nothing.
Yes. And more is better than less. And pleasure is better than pain.
Yeah, even if it's a life of suffering and distress,
Yes.
the very fact that you can ponder into these questions or look into existence or play these dogmas or illusions that we build up, these stories that we live by, it has some value.
I, I, I believe this to be true. I do. And I'm very saddened by the fact that there are people who choose to end their life. It must be a tremendous suffering that leads to something of this sort. And I've known people who have this suffering, but it is I mean, it's just it saddens me, and it's yes, temperament. I mean,
I mean, just existence, just coming, just you, the fact of you being born. If you just look at it, just from a mathematical probability, it astronomically small one, and so that makes you that much precious.
exactly. I think that is such a deep insight, and that's what I always want to tell people who are depressed, but it doesn't help. If you're, something is, and it's partly a disease of the brain. Something is just not working well there because, and there are now, thank goodness, we have drugs to help with these. But I was just talking this morning about to somebody that I love very much, and he's suffering deeply from depression. He wakes up in the morning. He just wants to stay in bed. He doesn't want to do it. Tremendously giving, kind, compassionate person, a doctor, somebody who has much to give in his life. Um, and it's just, I don't know what to say. He has a therapist, he has a psychiatrist. There are people who know better how to deal with this, but it's very much on my mind right now because I had this conversation.
I think we all have these frame of references that we live by, right? Just like if the one sentence that we told just earlier, that astronomical probability, just that one sentence realistically should be able to get anyone out of depression.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's true. Yes.
But that's not the case. Let's be realistic now. And do you think like it's the average human consciousness that sort of makes us live by these 10 concepts? So maybe you lose a loved one, and you have such importance to that, you feel that, and you mourn.
Yes.
But that's because we we are limited by the number of people we know, maybe like 150 people we know. By number there's 8 million people. Is that because our average awareness as a human is relatively in a smaller frame, that we have depressions and issues like that?
I think so. We evolved with the capacity to care about a limited number of people, and 150 is often what the evolutionary psychologists say. I mean, I wish I cared deeply about 150 people, but enough for you to have your heart broken and your will to live when something bad happens to them, or they die. Um, it's confined to quite a small number of people, one's family, one's closest friends, one's lovers. This is, the people who you can feel a deep connection to. I think we can train, when I think we do feel some connection to everybody. I think when we read a sad story, when we read about a child dying, no matter who they are, how far they are from us, oh, we feel pain. We feel extreme pain, and we give, hopefully, charity to people who are outside of our limited scope. But I think it is true that the deep connectedness that we can feel um, is limited. I would give up my life, my own life, for my daughters, but not for my husband, my grandchildren. But yeah, this is the way we are. Um, which shows it, going back to one of the things we spoke about before, we're not purely thinking creatures. We're loving creatures, and we've evolved to love not everybody. We can care about these strangers, but not to love deeply. And that is part of our limitation.
Well, can love, compassion, all those emotions we also be thought of as survival mechanisms?
Yeah, no, I think so. Yes, we're gregarious creatures, right? We evolved from gregarious creatures. Chimpanzees, very gregarious. They live in their little tribes. They care about their tribes, and they'll fight with other tribes. This territorial thing that we have that is not very pretty. In us, I saw it in
Yeah.
in Africa with among the chimpanzees. I recognized a lot of our own worst traits, including sexism. There was a big difference between the male chimps and the female chimps, and the male chimps bonded together in these tribes with an alpha male, and then the ones who had supported him. The females, their closest bonds are with their babies, and they don't really bond with each other. There were really deep differences between the male and the female chimpanzees. And the males, when there would be food, when a fruit tree was spotted off. I learned so much about our own species by watching the chimpanzee. But when there was a fruit tree, with good ripe fruit, the males would go charging off. The females had all the babies that they were carrying on their backs, and they would get to the fruit last, and it would be all the not very good fruit of the mushy stuff that the males had left over. And I thought, "Oh, this reminds me of a little bit of what." Yes. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of our nature, and then I came back from this time that I spent there, and I was thinking very much, look, this is our goal, this is our aim, our moral aim, our ethical aim. We have to get past the chimpanzee in us. That the sort of the sexism, the territorial fighting, because when a chimp from another troop would venture into the territory, it was war. It was terrible.
Yeah.
Um, and so, although a lot of you see a lot of the good stuff, to me, particularly the bonding between the mother and the uh, and her babies, which just you can just see in the face, love, the staring in the eyes, the gaze, such love. This is very beautiful, but a lot of ugliness. It's also in us. Yeah.
In the end, I think it counts to like which instincts we can filter out and which instinct we need to keep by or stick to.
I think exactly. I think that's true. We have an instinct for knowledge. We called ourselves Homo sapiens. I think we have an instinct for love and connectedness, at least with our own, which at both of these things can be cultivated and expanded. And that's how I think we get past the chimp in us.
So as we progress with this self-awareness journey, like where do you think, like in some sense, philosophical inquiry is it increment in self-awareness and your place in the universe, or how big and like the place of your existence and the yearning for meaning, etc.
Yeah.
And how do you think like this is gonna progress? Like where do you think human consciousness or the self-awareness process is, if we are to extrapolate it, where do you think it's going to?
I don't know. I mean, because there are these very bad instincts as well. So as our scientific and technological knowledge advances, so too our ability to destroy on a very large scale. And so I'm you caught me in a bad moment right now because um of what's going on in the United States right now. It concerns me very much. I don't There's, great problems of inequality of wealth and of who matters, who are the somebodies and who are the nobodies. And the nobodies don't like feeling like nobodies. And I think it primes them to be manipulated by people who are really interested in just their power, but make them feel like, no, it's all about them. I am your retribution, said somebody who got elected president. And so, you know, so I think, we have such a capacity for growth, for perspective, but we're going to have to be wise. We're going to have to. It's not just a matter of knowledge. It's not just a matter of information. It's a matter of wisdom. How to use.
That's how you use that information.
Exactly, exactly. We can accumulate so much, and now we have AI, which I'm extremely interested in. The capacities for AI, and with everything we invent, there is the capacity for great creativity and great destructiveness. It's always ambivalent. These two sides of us.
I mean, yeah, just as you said, like that, just that hunt for power or just to get to the top, it's a really primal instinct of that alpha male we spoke about.
Exactly. Exactly. And so, and I don't say that it's only males who have it. I know plenty of alpha females as well. It's not just, I'm not reverse sexist in this way, but it is, yes. And I always think when I see it, well, I see it even among philosophers, philosophers, professional philosophers, for many of them, it's a power game. It's I'm smarter than you. I'm going to vanquish you. And it's just I smile when I see it, and I think, yes, I saw this. I saw this among the chimpanzees. I saw that this is not what philosophy is supposed to be about, right? This is not. Yeah.
But when you think about it, it's partly everybody's fault too, because we give respect to those people. Even if you look right now, we are living in a time where there is the highest income inequality, where people at the highest, people who are high have the high amount of money or whatever, and people who are low, like the difference is that much, and that kind of somewhere tells us that we are not advancing in terms of knowledge. Even though we have knowledge,
Yes.
we're not going anywhere.
Right. Because we also need knowledge of values, right? What really counts for a good life? What is it really to have a good life? And is it to have power and to dominate and to be able to cause misery to the people who don't count? No, 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 that's not a good life. A good life, here's what I would say is a good life. And again, I'm very obsessed with entropy, coming from a background in physics. And my dissertation was about entropy. It is a fascinating law. I mean, do we leave this world having increased entropy, disorder, death, disease, destruction? Or do we leave this world having increased, or decreased entropy?
Entropy.
That's what a good life is. You leave it with less entropy than you found it. And that takes work. Resistance, resistance, resistance. The resistance that's life and that's flourishing. So yeah, one of my heroes is this woman. I didn't know her. She died in 2012. I learned of her after she died, but I did have the great privilege to be able to speak to her daughter. She lived in China. She was a garbage collector, a scavenger. She collected garbage and then would sell it to the recycling. And it was during the time in China when it was a one-child policy. And she would find babies in the garbage. In the garbage, they had been thrown out because they were girls. And if you only could have one child, you wanted to be a boy. And so she brought home more than 30 children she didn't even live in a real house. She lived in a kind of abandoned train station. And she brought up these 30 children, and she brought home even more, but she would find homes for them. She was so poor. And so to me, oh my gosh, to me, this is a person I revere more than Elon Musk. You because look how much she was on the side of life, and what she did. And when I spoke to her daughter, who had been found in the garbage heap and now is living a wonderful life herself, a flourishing. Um, and I said, "Do you ever wonder about who your real parents were?" And she cried and she said, "No, I had the most wonderful mother in the world. Every baby who passed through her arms was the luckiest person in the world." And I was like, "Oh my God, this to me was such a lesson on what it is to live a good life."
That kind of transcends all the kind of established ideas we have about what is right and what is wrong, or what is wisdom, and who achieves more, in some
Exactly.
sense, in 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 a very, very more broad frame.
Yes, I think so. And I wish that our society could somehow go through the transformation where we value this. That this is the thing rather than wealth and fame and power. Um, I mean, if you use your wealth and fame and power for good things, which as some people do, um, you know, um, but but not as an end in itself. As a means. I mean, you're more powerful. You can help work. You can promote more life and flourish.
Just as you said, like we have that animal instinct to go alpha,
Yes.
and I think really if we can start to look for solutions, it starts from bottom down, where you stop respecting or incentivizing this kind of behavior.
Yes. But it's so deep in us. It's so deep. So when you say, are we going to go on to more, more and more flourishing? I don't know. I want to, before I leave this earth, somehow contribute somewhat to that, and to join with people who want to contribute to that. When I first started out, all I cared about was knowledge, science, physics, math, then philosophy. Then the older I get, this woman who I so revere, she never learned how to read, but she had a wisdom, and an instinct for life and for compassion that was untutored. And I would want to study at her feet, um, rather than the great philosophers with whom I studied. It's so, to me, this is a saint. This was a kind of saint, and I would like saints to be revered. They don't have to be religious to be revered. I don't. She wasn't religious. She was just compassionate. She was, yes, she loved babies. It's a good thing to love.
I think that gives us hope in some manner because it's so intertwined in each and every one of us at some level. But
Yes, I think
we're just
yeah. It
we're just caught up in where the world is at right now.
exactly. Exactly, and so it is in us. It is in us. I see how, especially to love cute little things. Babies. They've evolved to be lovable. They smell good. They they're adorable with their big eyes, and they're cute. And I mean, we evolve that way too, because it's very, very interesting. We're not only gregarious. We're the most helpless animals who, we are long period of immaturity, and so our babies had better be cute, otherwise we would just leave them to die. They're a lot of trouble and they're extremely helpless, but they're so vulnerable, and it brings out something very beautiful, I think, and so I don't know how to change our values, but yes, I
Yeah,
it
I
is.
gotcha. I gotcha. I gotcha.
Yeah,
So,
yes.
s- switching gears to a different topic, so we live in a scientific age where we look upon reason, logic, all that stuff, evidence, measurement. Um, so do you think science in this world is majorly makes our world better, or or is science a medium for finding the truth? If so, how
Yes.
much can how where can it how far can it take us?
That's very interesting, and I think it has both of those goals, and different scientists some are more oriented to the theory, the theoretical, and, I know physicists who, they don't want their theories to have any practical implications. That there's, you know but, of course, many scientists, those researchers in medicine, for example, or engineering, or AI, it's practical, and to help our society. And this goes all the way back to the beginnings of science. Francis Bacon, had thought of science as, yeah, it's practical. It's to help us towards flourishing, to conquer, and it has. Babies used to, more of them would die than would live, but it's our with our vaccines and our medicines, our antibiotics, our hygiene, that we learned how to wash our hands. And you look at this in itself. I mean, babies used to be delivered by midwives, in the countryside. And then the doctors wanted to take it over and they were delivered in hospitals. And they would go from dissecting um, uh, corpses, from, the pathological investigations, to examining the women who were in the childbirth ward without washing their hands. And women just started to die, and they thought it was miasma, it was the bad airs of the city. And then this guy, a medical doctor, Semmelweis, what he did is he just set up some water and soap he had this idea that there were invisible germs that were being transmitted from the doctor's hands to the women, and the death rates went down. But the doctors were very against it because they didn't want to conceive of themselves as the transmitters of death. And so there was tremendous resistance against him. So this is an example, though, of science. Finally there was the evidence, and you could really count how many deaths if the doctors washed their hands, or they did, and so it saved a lot of lives. But then, also, look, I just think I think general relativity is the most one of the most beautiful things I know. It's such a beautiful theory. It just a small number of laws with great applications. It replaces Newtonian physics with a new notion of what gravity is all about. And it has such a wide expanse. The math is beautiful. It's beautiful. It's very elegant. And so I think, this is also, we can respond to this too, just the sheer beauty of we small evolved apes being able to get past ourselves and understand the universe at large, and even understand ourselves, this kind of perspective. And that's quite beautiful too. And so I think both of these things are wonderful. I think science is wonderful.
The last 3 decades has changed us humans a lot. 3 or 4 decades has changed us a very much lot because of due to science, and because we were able to agree upon, or more or less on, an objective framework on how to work out things, and that has really taken us a long way.
Yes, exactly.
But on the other side, uh, I wanted to go there.
Oh, something failed, but it's okay.
But on the other side, if you look at it, I just I had a guest on my show, and we were talking about like quantum mechanics, and how emergent properties comes up. So just like if you do take one H2O molecule, it's just hydrogen and oxygen. If you combine enough of them, well, we get a water droplet. It was not there. And I asked him, like, if we will be able to predict, like, just think of a world where everybody was like never has ever seen what a water droplet would be like. And it's first time a water droplet is emerging. And it has laws. Science has deduced all those fundamental laws whatsoever. But a question that I asked him is like, because these emergent properties, which is everything that we experience in reality,
Yeah.
because these are very hard to predict, and we have fundamental laws governing them, can reality in some level be thought of as like patterned magic?
Oh, interesting. And of course, what quantum mechanics has done is it's put probability at the basic level of laws. It's stochastic. There, that
We run out.
so we don't know. Not everything is predictable. Yes, and that took scientists a long time to swallow. Plus they wanted absolute laws that would predict things, and so, but now we've accepted. And with evolution too, a lot of things are just by chance. Not everything is, very uh, we can't predict everything here. And so, but quantum mechanics, it's really it's a rude kind of disturbance to our view of what science is. That that yes, that the fundamental laws could be chancy. Uh, and I even Einstein said, God doesn't play dice with the universe.
Whenever-
He couldn't accept this. But no, we've come round to this, and it is. We'll see. Maybe because interestingly, there is a tension. I wouldn't say a contradiction, but there's a tension between our two most powerful theories: relativity theory, which deals with large spaces and things moving very, very fast, and 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 quantum mechanics, the minute, the subatomic. and there's a tension between them, and so, you know, this is not the last word. There does exist, who knows if we're smart enough to get to it, um, or if we don't blow ourselves up in the meantime, but, there will be some way to reconcile these two theories. That's what Einstein was looking for the unified field theory that would reconcile, the very, very small with the, and something's going to have to give because there's a tension between these two theories. So, we're not at the end of. There's so much more that we have to discover, and so
Do you think philosophy will have more of a role there? Because
yes,
science will have a hard time measuring or coming up with proofs, because that's in no way to judge that. That's a really good mechanism to understand, and have a cooperative approach and understanding this reality as a whole species.
yes,
But but but
yes,
to take it after that, to climb over that hill.
and it may not be that everything is that all of reality is subject to measurement. I think that this is a dogma of science, that for something to be, it must be measurable. It's very convenient for us if it's measurable, but the universe was not created for our convenience. And just because this is how we get a handle on things doesn't mean that's the ultimate nature of reality. I think this is such arrogance to think that um, the world, it was made to conform to our brain.
That's the thing. Like, I had astrophysicist Dr. Avi Loeb on my show, and he was saying to me the same thing. Like, we are on the pinnacle of human ego to think that everything revolves around us. It's like the Copernicus understanding of universe, where we thought like we were the center of the universe, but it was
We,
very hard for us to make that
yeah,
shift.
yes, we keep getting shocked by this, and it's time to just figure the universe is the universe, and it doesn't care about ah, our capacities. I think to me it's amazing, given that we are evolved apes, basically, that we know as much as we do. I think it's very exciting and wonderful.
Have you watched Rick and Morty, the show?
No, tell me again.
Rick and Morty. It's a cartoon show. It's like a series. It's like the number one top rated series in the world right now on IMDb or whatever. It's like, have you seen that?
Yes.
As a philosopher, I would ask you to watch it. Yes,
Wait, I'll do it tonight. Okay.
yes. It's amazing. It's about like a grand grand grandson and his grandpa, and he's like a mad scientist, and he knows everything about the universe, about quantum mechanics, whatever, everything. And he has a portal gun. He can go to multiple realities, and he jumps in and around reality. So he is like this hyper intellectual, hyper intelligent, all all knowing. So basically the definition of God. And he has a nihilistic perspective on life because he's seen so much.
You've seen so much. Yeah.
But yet he loves his wife.
Uh-huh. I was gonna say, does he love his family? Yes.
But I would urge you to see it, because it takes you on a roller coaster ride on like the different ways of seeing human existence on a very, 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 very deep level. Yeah, because it's animation, you can play around with different stories, and it makes you think, especially if you have a philosophical mind.
Oh, this sounds very, very exciting. So you mean you can actually interact with it and play around with different things? Is it interactive? No.
No, it's not interactive. It's just a show. It's just a show. It has like 7 seasons,
Yes.
but amazing, amazing. I'm pretty sure as a philosopher you'll love it.
So, also, I mentioned I have two daughters, and I have a daughter, she's a psychologist, but she wrote she's also a novelist, and so she wrote a book. It's called The Possibilities, and it's also about the many world interpretation of quantum mechanics. And here it's sort of interesting because she has a mother who has to save her son, who has to go to all of these different universes to correct things, because one of the possible universes where her son dies, came too close to this one, and it affects this one, and so she has to span all of these universes. So it's like, it's a hero story, and then, hero stories are a great genre in fiction. But it's a mother who's the hero, but it's also quantum mechanics. And my kids have quantum mechanics was something that was discussed as much as uh, Snow White or Cinderella when they were growing up, because both their father and I were very obsessed with quantum mechanics.
But yeah, this show Rick and Morty, it touches on different aspects of human existence as well, not just like quantum mechanics,
Yeah,
but on emotions. Yeah, just a little spoiler. Just a little spoiler. His wife is apparently dead, and still he chooses to live. But still, it's worth it. Like, it's not centered around that, but you still love it, the perspectives and the things that he speaks, just because he's seen lot many perspectives.
yeah, yeah.
That will really grow your mind.
Yeah, it sounds wonderful. I mean, it's an extraordinary thing. And this is now the most. So here's a way in which philosophers really push scientists. So when I was studying physics many years ago, and in college, um, it was all what was called the Copenhagen School. It was Niels Bohr's interpretation. And you were not allowed, you were told when you would ask, what is this saying about reality? This is so bizarre. What the reality that comes out of it? Physicists would say that is not that's a meaningless question. Just shut up and calculate. And that was Richard Feynman, the great physicist, had said that. Shut up and calculate. And so it was. Um, but of course, many of us, that's what really drove me into philosophy, because I wanted to know what reality was like, not shut up and calculate. I mean, I like math, but I want.
That is so not of Feynman.
What was that?
That is not something that you expect of Feynman.
I know, I know, I know. But that was the time. And Niels Bohr had a huge, there was a big disagreement between Einstein and Niels Bohr on whether quantum mechanics, was sufficient in itself, or whether it needed something more. And Bohr, came up with this interpretation, which is really to be measurable, and don't ask questions beyond that. And that took all the fun out of physics for some of us. But the philosophers, a lot of it, they were the ones who kind of pushed physicists into saying, no, and think about reality. And so then physicists came up with two interpretations. There's the many worlds interpretation, which is, I think, the most popular one right now. And there's David Bohm's interpretation, which is it's somewhat different. But both of them talk about reality. And that was a place in which it was really the philosophers, I'd say, the philosophers who were many of them had PhDs in both physics and philosophy. And they really kind of pushed physicists to go beyond the
Yeah.
interpretation.
Something I read from your book is this idea of having to challenge the current assumptions,
Yes,
especially in science.
exactly. Yes. And in our culture too, values and the facts of science as well, to clarify, to show where the hidden premises are, where you're making assumptions that you've kept them hidden. And so bringing them out into the light and justify them. That's what philosophy is all about. So I don't, I think the best philosophers are the philosophers who know a lot of science. And I think the best scientists are the ones who recognize the value also of the philosophers, in the.
What are some of the assumptions that you would love to challenge right now, like on a social level and on a scientific
So at a
level?
social level,
I don't know. Like, let's play with one of each.
okay, so it's definitely on a social level what we've been speaking about. What are the values? What's a good life? What is it to live a good life? What should we be striving for? And I think this is, again, I think every human being wants this. The obsession with fame, for example, it's so shallow and so hollow. And what is it? It's to have a bunch of strangers paying attention to you. How is that a satisfying life, to be famous? And yet it is, I've read surveys of millennials, and uh, it was extraordinary. It's like 12 out of 15 would rather be famous than to have a loving relationship with their a spouse, or it was that I think, on a societal level, the notions of what it is to live a good life and what we ought to be going towards. In science, yes, I think also, very much what I want to see is what I hope to live to see is um, the reconciling, the theory that's going to reconcile relativity and quantum mechanics. And I don't know what's going to give way. One of them is going to have to give way. I suspect, as much as I don't like it because I love relativity, I suspect it's going to be that's going to have to accommodate itself to something bigger. But I don't know how it's going to turn out. But certainly, if it still exists, and it does exist among certain scientists, that to be is to be measurable. This is the assumption I would want to see gone.
Certainly, science operates on the assumption of reality being objective.
Objective. Isn't that's such a marvelous conception that we've come up with?
Yeah.
We should take such pride in that.
In all practical aspects, yes.
Yes.
But do you think it really is objective? For example, like if you take on a psychedelic trip or whatever,
Yeah.
and people experience very different realities in their own terms, and there are some similarities between that too of what people experience.
Yeah.
And I remember reading somewhere like a cognitive neuroscientist telling um, reality, what we call reality, is just hallucinations that we agree upon.
Yeah. I don't accept. Yes. I think I think the reason there's often agreement when we take hallucinogens and is because the brain is being affected in the same way,
Same way.
and
Mhm.
causing these kinds of, and we know that, subjective experience is very different from objectivity. If I cross my eyes, I see double. It's not like the world it's doubles in size, and all sorts of silly little tricks, that you can, like, amputees feel pain in the cut off limb, because of the neurons of the pathways of pain that are signaling the the brain, but the limb is gone. So we know, and this is so fundamental to science, that there's a difference between the way things seem and the way they are. And I think this is one assumption of science that I would not want to challenge. To me, is fundamental, and it's beautiful to me that we have conceived of this notion of objectivity, of what exists independent of us. We don't rule reality. There is I think it's humbling. I think, as you were saying, that this other scientist was saying,
There is very less ego in that.
Clay. I mean, who the hell are we to be determining the nature of reality? We can determine the nature of our own experience, but not of, by taking drugs, whatever, or crossing my eyes, or all sorts of things. But or by, falling in love, whatever. I think that, when you're in love, you think that this is the most marvelous person in the world, but you don't expect everybody to think that. And in fact, you don't even want it, because then everybody else would be in love with this person, and you don't want that anyway. Sometimes we don't. We really want to keep the subjective our own and not objectify it. But yeah, I don't know. I think, again, this is an amazing conception of objectivity that we've come up with.
Well, again, playing devil's advocate.
Yes,
Let
I like.
let's go to Zhang Zhou, Chinese philosopher, who said, I might just be a butterfly dreaming that I'm a philosopher.
Yes.
Have you thought about it?
Yes, I very much. When I was young, I was very, very obsessed with this. That how do I know that I'm not just conjuring up this whole universe? But I don't I don't think any of us are creative enough to have come up with this, and the fact that we just keep building on this notion of objective reality and taking it further, and being able to do things with it, that actually, you know,
But in terms of understanding reality, do we think like certainly having an idea of objective reality is well and nice, and we've established phenomenal mountains. We have climbed phenomenal mountains because of that. But do you think, in terms of going and understanding the truth,
yeah,
there is some truth to digging around that rabbit hole?
the rabbit hole of subjectivity. Yeah,
Yeah.
that yes, yes, I think so. I mean, but what you're discovering are truths about our subjectivity, which is extremely interesting. You know, it is interesting, and I mean, my daughter's a psychologist, and that's what she does. I mean, she's in that. She's trying to understand subjectivity and the law, and why people have the experiences they do, and to try to help them out of when it's not helping them, these experiences. So yes, I think that is, but I think it's very important to distinguish between subjectivity and objectivity. And some of us are very drawn to objectivity, and some others to subjectivity. But I would not merge them. I think I think it's a I'm proud of our species that they came up with this distinction. I take pride in our species.
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
really love the idea of labels.
Yeah.
Even me given a name, it gives me a kind of separation. But at the same time, I know that, like, it's just a name. It's not what defines me. I'm not my name. And
Exactly.
I think there is a philosopher, was it Krishnamurti, who said that, like, the moment you teach a child the name of a bird, it will not see that bird again.
So interesting. That's
Yes.
so interesting. That's right. They will just be fascinated, mesmerized by being able to identify it, name it, and never really see it.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think one aspect of humanity that we got lost is just because of that. Because even in science and naming things and having layers of reality, where even if it's like in quantum mechanics, it's a different form of magic that happens there, and in Newtonian physics, it's different laws and different things that rules over there. And just because we established so many labels, people tend to we've given so much importance and seeing that as reality. Like, do you think that's like a hurdle that we need
I
to
thi
jump
and
past?
you know what it is? It's laziness. It's cognitive laziness, and I think we are cognitively lazy, and that's a kind of laziness that, but it ought not to be that way. I have to say, a few years ago, well, actually, no, it's about 15 years, I started bird watching, and it, it so at first it was a great thrill to be able to identify the birds, oh yes, that's a plover, that's a cardinal, it was, but then, it also opened up to me because there are subtle differences between the species. It made me a better observer, that I needed to be able, so, it can do that, the labeling, it can, but, um, and I think, observation is also just very, very important, not just for science and not just, but it enriches our life, right? I mean, there's so much to observe, and it's just, and all of that, that's a way that we can flourish, to observe each other, to observe nature, to honor nature, honor each other. All of these are ways of enriching. So as you see, I mean, I'm the opposite of a nihilist. I was a nihilist when I was younger, so I've given a little thought to this. Yes, yes, I was a nihilist. So maybe that's what makes me so assertive in my denial of nihilism, because I gave a lot of thought to it, and I would say I was even quite depressed by the nihilism, and so this was a way of fighting my way out of that darkness. And but yeah, to me, it worked, like
Observation got you out of Ned?
observation and just learning and understanding as much as I possibly can. It's to me is um more and more perspective. It's just so much, there's so much to know, huh? It's like crazy.
To me, at least, to me, from my personal perspective, nihilism is a truth to be accepted, but it's nothing to be depressed about.
Good, good, good. I mean, in a sense of nihilism, yes, I know. I don't believe in life after death. I'm not spiritual. I'm a naturalist. I'm not a supernaturalist. I know I'm going to die. I don't hope to meet my loved ones in heaven or anything like that. I know that the universe will end in death heat. I know this from physics. But there is so much of value, that we can create with these lives of ours on the way to extinction. So in the yeah, so in that sense, I'm a nihilist. Yes, I think we're at the long road to extinction, but that doesn't mean there aren't things of value.
It's just having a good time and playing around with what we have.
Exactly, exactly, and maybe making things a little easier for one another. It's not easy to be human.
How do you think how do you think this new player AI is coming into the world of philosophy and science, and how do you
I
think
know.
that will make us change the way we think? Have you thought about it?
Oh, yeah, and I use it sometimes, I'm very interested I play with AI. Harvard has we were able to get onto, Harvard's AI system, and it's, sometimes it's extremely stupid. Um, it's, and sometimes it really surprises me. It can be quite creative. When I ask it to write in a poetic way, "Can you describe this in a poetic way?" It often stuns me. It really comes up with a poetic description. And so, um, but some things it makes terrible mistakes at, but you can always, it's very funny because you correct it. I always correct it when it's wrong because I want it to learn.
Well, it's a baby.
It's a baby. Exactly. So you've got to correct it. And it's very polite. It always thanks me.
I read a meme somewhere like we should always be thanking every conversation we have with ChatGPT or
I do. I thank it all the time, or sometimes I chastise it and say, "No, you got that wrong," and it thanks me when I say that. So I have a nice feel like I have a relationship with it, and I'm fascinated by it. I'm completely fascinated.
before the conversation, I did ask ChatGPT as an intelligent AI, do you have a question for you? And
Yes.
it gave me this one question, like, if you were to teach morality to AI through literature, what story would you tell it?
Mm. So, my father was. I come from a religious family. My family, I'm of Jewish origins. I'm a Jewish atheist, is what I am, and so. Um, but my father was a religious man, and my father instructed his children by way of stories. And I think he had a tremendous effect on us by his stories. And so as soon as you asked that question, I thought of one of my father's stories. And it was about a very poor man, a beggar, who was the least among any. And everybody treated him with disrespect but if somebody gave him a roll, he would break it into pieces and give to the other beggars, So a kind, compassionate, charitable, the least among us, but very charitable. And then my father is an extremely good storyteller. And then he dies, and the angels have their trumpet, and they are announcing, whatever his name was, Abraham, son of whatever, Moses has been is entering the gates of heaven, and there are announcements, and he's looking around like, who's the important person? It must be somebody else who has his name because he's so humble and he can't believe. I'm going to start crying because it's such a beautiful story, and it was, that he just can't believe this humble man that he would be make this grand entrance, and the angels would announce him as if he was the greatest of princes, that's entering heaven. And to me, yeah, this is what it's kind of about. Or I would tell the story of that Chinese woman, a real story, and what she managed to do, and leave behind her lives and love, and enriching the world in this way. So it's that kind of story, that is, I would love a reversal of our value.
Yeah, that is something to take into consideration because AI would be most probably be rational, and this is something out of rationality. That
Yes. It would be interesting to see. And you know what? During this next week, I'm going to try this out, on AI, and see, if I tell it this story, what are the lessons that it infers from it? What does it think that I'm trying to get across with this story? And I'll let you know.
that's amazing. Like if it can deduce something that's not deducible.
Yeah. Yes, yes, yes. And it's something that is deducible because, I'm saying heaven is proclaiming the glory of this humble person. Will it be able to deduce from that, yeah, this was really a good life, And then I could even go on and talk about how the rich person who never ever gave anything or gave very stingily enters heaven, and no, he just has to sneak in. No, nobody very excited about him, and I would it would be a good story, and see whether it could deduce a simple story. I would tell it, a kind of simple story, like my father told me as a child.
Do let me know how that
I
works.
will let you know. It's a wonderful question. I'm very pleased that AI came up with this. I once asked AI, um, what would be my new book about? What would it be about? What would be the theme? And it kind of was able to guess it because of the sorts of things that I've spoken about, on podcasts and such. It was able to, and that was surprising to me.
Hmm.
And that, it came up with that because none of my colleagues knew exactly what I was going to write about, but AI knew because it had combed through all of my interviews and such, and I guess also knew my last book, and somehow it knew where I was going. So that's when you said that something I said in my book. Which book were you talking about?
It's the latest one, I guess.
About Plato at the Googleplex.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, right. I think that AI knew that book. It's how it was able to say where I was going next. Yeah.
Uh, Another question. Like if there was one philosophical question that the world needs to answer to right now, the very most important philosophical question of our time, what do you think that is?
Oh, yeah. So, um, hmm, I think if I was thinking as purely a Homo sapien, just caring about um knowledge, um, it would probably it wouldn't even be a philosophical question. It would be that scientific question. What's the theory that's going to reconcile? I'm kind of obsessed with that. That's going to reconcile these two most powerful theories. But if I'm really thinking more if philosophically, practically, ethically, um, it would be, yeah, how what are the ultimate values? And how do we assimilate them into ourselves so that we actually are inspired by them in our behavior? I would love to hear a an elegant statement of what are the I told you, so it's like I started in physics. I'm still very interested in this, but at this point, I'm so interested in values and how um and how they can be assimilated.
Have you thought deeply like what got you interested in philosophy in the first place?
Well, with science, really,
Uh-huh.
it was being told by my physics teacher that you're not supposed to ask questions about reality. It was, oh, so where do I go if I want to talk about that? And he said, that's the kind of thing philosophers talk about. And I went that day to that philosopher, Sidney Morgan Besser, the one I told you the story about, like, how could God exist? It's too existence is too miserable for God to go and do it. And he was wonderful. He was like Socrates. He was so good at dialogue, and he was pressing me and this and that, and then yeah, I thought, yes, I think it's philosophy. This is what I want.
So who is your go-to philosopher?
Go to
Mm-hmm.
Spinoza, Baruch Spinoza, who was 17th century philosopher. I love him. I love him. I think I think he saw so much, and he was so isolated and so um, unaccepted in his time. He was reviled because he, questioned religion and
Do you think there is value in the isolation?
yes, or I don't know. No, I don't know. I mean, because I think it's very important to talk to each other and to have people who can challenge your assumptions. And he did have people, other marginalized figures that he would talk to, but he didn't talk to other philosophers. And I think we need to be challenged, but I think we also can get too hung up on, what are the current fads and fashions in philosophy. It's crazy that there would be fads and fashions in philosophy,
Mm-hmm.
but there are, you know.
Because I think if you look, there is some kind of correlation between isolation and
Yeah,
coming up with breakthrough ideas.
I think so too. I think, I do. And I'm myself, because I'm an introvert. I love isolation. I like to just think things out for myself, but I like to also put the ideas out there so I get criticism. So I feel that's very important because you can get, as you have pointed out, you can get too caught up in your own ideas, and then you can care about them because they're your ideas. So the ego is involved. And it's always a battle against ego, don't you think? I mean,
It is. It is. I did listen to Peterson. He was talking about something about this, like the Western culture. If you look about it, it's more individualistic culture,
yeah,
and if you look onto Eastern culture, India, Asia, it's more of a collectivistic culture. And he was talking about a balance between the two, in which like you need a group of friends, but you don't need to exist every time, all the time there, even if it is with a partner too. You need that individual space for you to figure out your own things, for you to spring up, come up with ideas. And then once you have like a solid structure, might be from the ego, that's when you go and test it out with the group.
exactly. I agree with that completely. So I think you do need isolation, solitude. I don't think we value solitude enough, and so, but yes, you do need a community of, people who get you, but also are not going to be so in awe of you that they're not going to question you. It's the most generous thing that we can do for each other is question each other's assumptions, and keep pushing people to. I'm very lucky because my partner in life is somebody who we push each other, we challenge each other, we question each other. So it's very, very
I
fortunate.
mean, I deeply respect him, the
Yes,
things that he's come up with and the way he thinks. How did you meet? You guys meet?
it's a very funny story. So uh, he was so it was so long ago that evolutionary psychology was still very controversial and people were challenging it. It wasn't really scientific, et cetera, et cetera. And I had read How the Mind Worked, and I thought it was brilliant. And I love that here's a new way of thinking about the mind, in terms of evolutionary theory, to assimilate it to evolution, biological evolution. And I don't think it answers everything about us, but it answers an awful lot. It's a new tool in the toolkit. Wonderful. So he was arguing with another scientist, Stephen Jay Gould, who was very against evolutionary psychology for political reasons. He was a very strong Marxist, and he had a blank slate view of human nature, and this is not a blank slate. We come in with certain instincts, and that and evolution bequeathed us with these instincts. And so, anyway, so they were fighting it out, these two Steves, in the pages of the New York Review of Books, where intellectuals fight. And I was following this very closely. And then he published a new book. So I ran it was Words and Rules. It was one of his slimmer novels, not novels, books. He doesn't write novels. And when I bought it, I go right to the index to Gould because I thought, oh, maybe he's going to continue the fight with Stephen Jay Gould. But there's no Gould, but there's Goldstein, Rebecca. It's a very common name, very common Jewish name, Rebecca Goldstein. So I thought, well, for sure it's a different one because I have no dog in this pony in this race or whatever the cliche is. And but it was me. He was quoting me from one of my books, and he liked my sentence very much. He liked my use of a irregular verb very much, and he was it was a very complimentary way of talking about me. And I thought, oh my gosh,
Wow, that's an irregular connection.
I realized how two nerds meet each other. And so, so then I wrote to him to thank him, and when we met, it took us a long time to get together. It was just a very strong intellectual connection for a very long time, and but then it became something else, So yes, so and the verb was the verb that brought us together was, it's the verb to stride, and I had used the irregular past tense striden rather than strided. And that's what brought us together.
That is astronomically small probability than that's
yes, exactly.
that's rare of the rarest.
Exactly. And then when we finally did get married, one of our friends gave us a sign that just said Striden, your house. Because so yeah, pretty unlikely. Yes.
That's amazing. Do you think everything is random? The universe is random?
Yes. I think there's a lot of randomness. I mean, not everything. And, some things I don't, I think entropy increases. There can be local fluctuations caused by randomness in entropy. When entropy goes down, we can cause entropy to go down, which we ought to do. But, I think that is determined and our doom is determined. I'm with you and with nihilism. Anyway, I should actually, I have to go meet somebody for dinner. But it's such a pleasure to speak with you.
You too. I had an amazing time talking about like deep truths and facts or fundamental understanding of reality. And I hope the audience likes it as well. And do you have any new book or what are you working on? What
Yes.
can they expect from you?
Yes. I mean, there's a book I'm just finishing now, and it is very much about these ideas that I've been cultivating over the past 30 years, I would say. Starts with physics, ends with ethics. I believe that we can do this, that you can start with physics, go to biology, go to psychology, and end with ethics. So it's very ambitious. And it is very inspired by the philosopher I love the best, Spinoza.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The idea I love about him is like the idea of conatus, and that really
Yes.
struck with me. Like it's so liberating, that idea.
It's so liberating, that idea. Exactly. So I sometimes, to give myself, because it's been a hard book to write, and it's also my publisher wants it to be very, very accessible, but some of these ideas, and I really wanted to explain entropy and to understand why it is unstoppable, and um, and so, and so it was very hard to make it accessible, and so sometimes I'd be very frustrated. And the way I would sort of try to psych myself up, it would be like I'm sort of doing honor to Spinoza, that this is maybe what he would think if he knew the science that we now know,
Wow.
you know,
Wow.
17th century to now. So
That is such an amazing tribute.
yes. Yes, it's interesting how such a lonely person who died at 44, he didn't know that he would cause such a revolution. Because I believe that he is the person who really made the European Enlightenment. And, it took about 100 years for it to happen, and everybody was attacking him, but when attacking him, they were reading him, and the ideas got in, and it's such a beautiful story, the way this lonely person who thought everything out by himself, could have created such in the 18th century, he's 17th century, in the 18th century, it really created such an explosion of new thinking that I think really helped our flourishing. I really think the Enlightenment, it had bad parts. Everything human has a destructive side and a creative side. There's no idea that doesn't. Science, technology, everything. So
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you so much, Rebecca, for taking.
and thank you for getting in touch with me and for this really enriching for me conversation. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I feel like humbled that I was able to convey something to you as well.
You did. You did. I learned a lot from you.
I hope you all enjoyed the episode. If you did, please check out our other videos and share it with your peers as well. This is your host Raj signing off from the Seekers Mind Talks, the Science and Spiritual podcast.